Hello there and welcome to another Hero Arts video. It's Michelle Short here, and today I'm going to be creating a subtle background using dry embossing. But first I'm going to work on my focal point. This is the colour layering dragonfly set and it's really pretty. So you've got the outline of the dragonfly and then you've got two layers that you can stamp for the wings. I'm actually starting off with what probably would be your final layer if you were to stamp this in the most traditional way. But sometimes I struggle to line these stamps up, and I found with this particular image that I'm using this layer first and then sort of work my way around it actually makes it better for me to line up the images. So you can definitely change things around, stamp them in whichever order works better for you. So I'm inking this up with the grape juice ink. And I'm stamping that twice. I'm using the mini Misty for this so that I can stamp it as many times as I need to. And then I'm going to stamp the outline layer on top of that. And for this I'm using intense black ink. And I'm stamping this down onto some Dove white cardstock. So I'm just making sure that that dragonfly outline is really well inked up. I'm not too concerned if I get a perfect image at this point because I'm actually going to double stamp it after I do the next layer. So that's all lined up nicely now. And I'm going to turn my Misty around. So I'm keeping that stamp there in the top and I'm going to stamp the middle layer now. So this is the solid layer for the wings. So I've lined that up and then I'm going to lift that up with the Misty door. And then I'm going to ink that up with the passion flower ink, and this is a really pretty purple colour and it's a bit lighter in tone than the grape juice that we've stamped the other layer with. And they give a really nice contrast between the two and it gives some nice dimension to the wings. So again I'm just going to double stamp that just so that I get a nice impression. And then because we're using the mini Misty here, I can rotate the mini Misty back around, have my cardstock in the exact same place, and then I can ink up that outline again and stamp that down, and that's just going to give an extra dark impression to the image. And then I'm going to cut that out with the coordinating frame cuts. And then I want to add a little bit of colour to the body here of the dragonfly. So I'm using a BV20 marker. This is quite a nice sort of grey toned purple and it's just going to give a bit of colour to that body, but without going too intense. I wanted to keep it quite light. And that's my dragonfly completed, and I can just set that aside while I work on the rest of the card. While I've got my stamping supplies out, I'm going to stamp my sentiment. This is the Mix and Match Compliment set and I'm using the small birthday and the small happy there. I'm going to stamp them down onto some pitch black cardstock using Versamark ink. Just inking up those sentiments, and then I'm going to stamp down into the mini Misty again. And then I can apply some detail white embossing powder. I sprinkle the embossing powder on and tap off the excess. For some reason I tend to do this 3 times, I feel that it gives a better impression. And then I'm going to heat set that until it's completely melted. And then I'm going to cut out the sentiments into strips using a craft knife and a ruler. And I realised that I got a little bit of extra embossing powder where I didn't want it, so I'm just using my craft knife to get rid of that. Now I'm going to work on the dry embossing portion, and this is the 3-part ornament frame cuts, and these are actually 2 separate dies, but they come connected in the pack and I absolutely love how they look together. So I'm using that as one whole piece and I'm placing that onto a panel of the Dove white cardstock, and I'm just going to temporarily keep that in place with some low tack tape, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. You can use any die cutting machine for this, but you want to have a rubber mat in place. This prevents the die from actually cutting through the cardstock. And for my old Cuttlebug here, I'm using some extra shims in place as well. And so I've just got 3 pieces of white cardstock there just as a shim on top of that rubber plate. And then I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. And this just gives some really nice subtle indentation into that panel. You can go as deep or as light as you wanted to with this. I went quite light just because I like that look. And that's going to create a nice background for our dragonfly to sit on top. I wanted to add some colour to the background of this piece, but I wanted to keep it quite subtle, and I thought it would look quite nice with some splatters. So I'm adding some of the same ink pads that I used before, that passion flower and the grape juice, onto a slick surface, and I'm spraying them with the white iridescent shimmer spray and just adding a little bit of extra water as well to get the consistency that I want to. And I'm mixing them up with a paintbrush. And then I can splatter that onto my background, and that's going to just give some nice shimmer to the card and also just a little bit more interest onto a white background. So I'm picking that ink up with a paintbrush, and then I'm going to splatter that onto the panel. And I find that the closer I get to the panel with the paintbrush, I tend to get a bit more control of where these splatters are actually going, but to be honest with you, they're going to go where they want to, but that's absolutely fine. It gives a nice organic look to the card. And those drops, although they're very small, they do give a really nice subtle shimmer to the card. So that's my panel completed. I set it aside to dry for a little while. It did dry really quite quickly. And I'm just adding a piece of foam sheet onto the back with some double-sided tape. And then I'm going to adhere that onto an A2 top folding white card base. I'm just pressing down really well, and then I can add my dragonfly on top, and I have added some thin foam tape onto the back of the dragonfly, but I've doubled up the layers on the edges of the wings just to give a bit more dimension to those dragonfly wings. And then I'm going to add my sentiment on top, so I've added some foam tape again onto the back of these sentiment strips. And I'm going to sort of add them sort of in a wonky design. I thought it'd be quite nice for this particular design of card. So I'm just placing them down onto the card there. And then to finish off, I wanted to add a little bit of some bling. So I'm going to add some sequins here. These are from the Butterfly Garden mix. And I'm just using those purple ones there. The purple works really nicely with the colours that I used on the dragonfly stamping. And I'm using some precision glue there just to stick them down in place and just helping that along with some tweezers. And then for this sequin here, I wanted to have it behind the dragonfly body, but because I've already added that foam tape there, I can't really fit that underneath, so I'm just cutting that down just to pop that down underneath, and no one will ever know that it's only half a sequin and not a whole one sort of popped behind. So just adding a bit more of that precision glue there, and then I can just pop that down. And I think they finish off the card quite nicely. So that's the card finished for today. I really like how that dry embossing just brings your eye to the focal point. And although dragonflies usually aren't purple, I think it looks really pretty in the purple colour. The links to the products that I have used will be over on the Hero Arts blog, and I will have a link to the blog post in the description bar here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.